Okay, so today's webinar is titled Creating Translanguaging Spaces and Multilingual Ecologies in Language Learning Classrooms for Teachers Community Action Projects with Ms. Nelly Geller, Ms. Liana Ignero, Ms. Alex Itzler, and Ms. Sandra Tendila. My name is Qing Lin. I will be moderating this New York State TESOL webinar. I will allow them to introduce themselves later, but I just want to say that these are talented and dedicated classroom teachers who are pursuing a TESOL extension so that they can better serve multilingual learners in their school district. So this presentation is based on an action research project. We work together on a TESOL course that I facilitated as an instructor over the summer. So please allow me to give you a little bit background of this presentation. So the course is about second language acquisition, which I have taught many years. And this summer I decided to redesign this course in response to a changing educational landscape that we have seen since the pandemic, where we have seen a closer collaboration and partnership between the school and the student community during the remote learning. And this creates us an opportunity for us to rethink and reimagine language teaching and learning, where parents and community at large can play an integral part in student success, and also the strategic role teacher can play in bridging the school and student community. So the course has two objectives. And the important task is to survey and understand and help teachers build their background knowledge about today's linguistic landscapes. And the changing here is not just to find out what language students use in their daily life, but also how students use language as a way of living and being in a complex world that we are living in. And second objective, of course, is to think about how we translate the insight we have gained from this survey into a classroom reality, so that the involvement of the community in the classroom or the school can become normal rather than an exception. So I'm grateful to these teachers who are willing to take time off from their busy schedule to share their work on this project with us. So every presenter will have about 10 minutes for their presentation. Sorry about the siren. They will be mindful about their time so that we can have about 10 minutes dedicated to Q&A. And we look forward to the after presentation discussion with you. So now without further ado, I will invite the first presenter, Ms. Sandra Tendila.
Yes. Sure. Hello, everyone. Alrighty, so my name is Sandra Tendilla, and I teach at a dual language public school. I've been teaching here for 6 years, and one of the things that I have noticed is that as a dual language teacher, we're not only working on teaching a second language, but we also have a lot of newcomer students who are learning English for the first time. So one way to be able to juggle this combination of students is be able to create activities that are geared towards creating a safe space for students, and where students are able to use their own languages because everyone has something to contribute, whether it's our background knowledge. So my community action project is, how can music create a community? What we focus in my project is pretty much think about the different ways that students can share their own background knowledge in a community. We're fostering a safe learning environment where students are able to take risks, because at the beginning, when you're learning a language, they have to feel comfortable and they have to be able to say 1 or 2 words to begin with. So just creating that comfort space and giving them that safety space that they can share and not be made fun of is definitely one way that we need to start creating a safe space. As a teacher, we need to develop student profiles so that we sort of are able to see which students need assistance. Some students are emergent, so we need to be able to tell what languages we have in the background, where our students are coming from, and how we can assist them, and just encourage a lot of participation. So the goal of my lesson is pretty much create and foster that safe space, allow students to translanguage in order to express themselves and show us that they're understanding. But we also want to focus on oral expression, giving the students opportunities to practice and share their ideas with others in small groups or in whole groups so that they can eventually develop language skills. We also want to relate it to our community because they are part of our community. So how can students see themselves as active members of our community? And the end goal of this project is for students to see what is a community and notice how they're able to contribute to their own community. So one way of doing this in my lesson is music. I think that not all music needs to have words. Music can be just instrumental, it can just be sounds, and students are able to relate and connect to the musical beats. We're also focusing on providing visuals. So visuals are very important, especially for language development. We want students to be able to understand. Sometimes students may not know a word, so it's important to give them that visual aspect of it. I'm also a visual learner, and sometimes I'm auditory learner too, so I have to combine those two. So I always consider those two when translanguaging in our classroom. So my project, it can be divided between 1 and 4 lessons. It can be cut down, or you can even expand it into 5 days. It is pretty much up to you and how much space you have for this project. My first day, I really focus on activating prior knowledge. Students get to learn about an artist. We compare a primary source from a secondary source. The second day is a hands-on activity day where students will explore instruments, and we will focus on that same artist. We're going to revisit our primary resource. And then the third day is pretty much students are creating their own musical activity and musical beat. And the fourth day is a reflection. How do they see music in their community? What is the impact of music in their community? On day 1, we focus on the essential question of what is the difference between a primary source and a secondary source. And what we do is we pretty much read a New York Times article. Now, this goes back to depending on the number of students that you have that might be newcomers that are acquiring the language, you might want to consider to use an article that they have in their own native language, or you can also translate it. We would use definitely just a primary source and a secondary source. In this case, I chose a New York Times article, and I'm going to compare it to my secondary source, which is a book on Tito Puente. And a way to differentiate this activity is to use a T-chart. Let's read the article. Let's list down some findings. And then the second part is we will read the story, and they can compare and contrast the 2 resources. So we start off everything with a book in ELA, and then we can move on to an activity where they get to go home and ask a family member, what do they know about Tito Puente? Because now they're sort of experts, or they're becoming experts on Tito Puente, and they get to go home and share their knowledge and also practice those oral skills that we mentioned at the beginning. We also ask them to think about a community and provide 3 examples that relate to a community. By the second day, students are going to start working on a hands-on activity. So as a teacher, you can work with the music teacher, or you can bring in some instruments that you have at home. Not all the instruments have to be big, not all the instruments have to be expensive, but it just creates curiosity for the students, and it makes the lesson much more engaging. So on day 2, we're pretty much going to focus on how do people contribute to the community of music. And since we did a read aloud on the previous day on Tito Puente, we're going to continue to explore Tito Puente's life and how he impacted people in the community. We also make cultural connections, because once the students start seeing the instruments, they start realizing, hey, I know an instrument that's familiar to that. Timbales can relate to the drums, to the congas, and it goes on to tap onto different cultures. So therefore, students can start sharing their personal experiences of where they have seen it. Maybe they've heard it in a song, one of their favorite songs. And this will lead to another activity for the following day, which they can bring in their own artifact so that they can share with the class on day 3. So day 2, it's hands-on. As a teacher, you can bring in some of these instruments. For example, we have a wooden flute. There's variations of flutes across Latin America. So students maybe might talk about the Andinian flute. Others might talk about just the flute that you learn in school, a regular flute that you might learn in school. You have maracas. Many students are familiar with the maracas. A guira is actually a small instrument that we hear a lot across Latin American music. A cowbell, popular, and timbales might be a little bit more difficult to find, but there's also the option of printing out some of these pictures and letting just the students explore and listen to sounds if we're unable to bring the instruments to them. On day 3, we're pretty much focusing on how do artists create music, what factors can impact the community when music is created by artists or people. So this was a lesson that I did create, and the students went home and they created their own instruments and then they brought them back to school. As you can see, we focus more on recycling materials and developing their own instruments. My favorite one here was a violin, where someone put some strings on it and they use cardboard boxes. So these were some instruments that they were able to create. You can let them create it, or they can also bring in instruments. I've seen artifacts where students have like ceramics where it's like a flute and they blow into it. So there are different ways that students can contribute to music, and we're going to talk about that impact. This is the day where you get to remake a song. So teachers can lead a song. You can lead with an instrument if you have one, if you're good at it. I don't play a specific instrument, so I will probably focus more on the lyrics or the song. You can make this a cultural song. You can borrow a song and sing it. For example, I know that in my classroom, we're using a lot Go Noodle. So we're using a song Lechuga Tomate. I've also seen this song in cartoons from Argentina, Bling Bling. So feel free to borrow a song and let students use their own language. The more comfort you create in students, the more they're able to contribute to the classroom and share their own background knowledge. You can be creative. You can create your own song as you go along. It doesn't have to be a real song. It could be a song that you invent as a class, and that if you create it right now in the beginning of the school year, you can continue to add on to it or rewrite it as the year progresses. And then you can also let the students be the lead. They can lead the song, and you can let other students jump in. So this can be a project where we're allowing students to take risks, and we're also letting students be the leaders of this activity. So for homework, they're pretty much going to go home and see, where do you see music in your community, and make a list. Now, the 4th lesson is pretty much a reflection about what impact music can have in a community. I'm in Jackson Heights. Before this, I was in Corona, and I did notice that there's a lot of people outside in the streets. They're very cultural. And so music can come in many different ways. Music can unite people. There's a lot of cultural places in the community that can foster playing an instrument. Some of them are going for dancing lessons. So students can reflect on where do they see music in their community. And some students also know how to play an instrument. That's another thing. I also surveyed my kids to see what instruments they play, and there's actually a variation of instruments in the classroom too. This lesson offers students an opportunity to translanguage because they can share their own languages. I focus more on the Latino students, but there are other opportunities for other books. Now, I like to change my books around, and some of the most recent books that I've noticed is Selena, Queen of Tejano Music. We're speaking about Selena Quintanilla, not Selena Gomez. But we can add Selena Gomez on here. We have also the book of Celia Cruz and Drum Dream Girl. It's another great book that we have about a girl that would like to play an instrument. So this is a lesson that allows for you to change the book. Maybe one year you want to try a different book, or you can also focus the book on the classroom, like where your students are from. One year I had a lot more Dominican students, so I changed the book to Island Born. So this is a book that this activity lends itself for changing the book if you need to, based on the population of your students. So again, this activity is geared, I'm a 5th grade teacher now. I've done this in 4th and 5th grade. It's good for upper grades, but it can definitely be modified so that it can be geared for lower grades too. And that is it. So thank you very much for the time and the space.
Thank you, Sandra, for sharing this culture and the language-rich lesson plan with us. So next, our presenter is Alex, Miss Alex Itzler.
Hi, everyone. Hi, so my name's Alex. I am currently a permanent substitute in a kindergarten through 5th grade elementary building, and I am currently going for a master's in TESOL. So my action project focused on taking the multilingual turn into my own classroom. So for this action project, we were able to interview 2 students in particular who were in my classroom, and both of them happened to be multilingual students who were at the transitioning level. My students came into this country when they were around 5 years old from both Honduras and El Salvador. And at their homes, their mom is completely fluent in Spanish. However, their father and their siblings have some grasp of the English language. However, school is mainly the place that they would practice English formally in reading, writing, speaking, and listening. So knowing this and knowing all the information I took from my interview, my students really enjoy working in partnerships. So I wanted to create opportunities throughout my thematic unit for that. And my students feel comfortable speaking their L1, which was Spanish, with both their friends and their teachers. So that's something that you'll see that I've incorporated throughout my unit as well. So my goal for my thematic unit was for my students to become global activists. So I think it's really important for educators to challenge the monolingual ideology in our classrooms. And so throughout my unit of argument and advocacy, I tried to get my students to be aware of the world around them and how they can have an impact on it as well, even as elementary students. So like I said, this is my argument versus advocacy unit. Before my day 1 of my supporting reasons, my students will have the background knowledge of what an opinion is. We've already listened to songs about opinions. We've practiced talking about what their opinions on certain topics. So today's day 1 of coming up with supporting reasons. So it was important for me to create a very interactive lessons for my students because they have so much energy in the beginning of the day. So it's really nice to get them up and moving. And so throughout the room, I would have certain prompts hung up, such as should classrooms have more diverse classroom libraries? Should people volunteer in the community? And what the best tradition is. That way my students are able to make those personal connections to the prompts and help them come up with stronger supporting reasons. And along with going around the room, I like to pair them up with a student. And in my classroom, I can either pair them up with someone who is a native English speaker, or I could also give them the option to speak and pair up with someone who speaks the same native language. That way they're able to clarify any information or ask any questions in their native languages. And I also like to supply my students with sentence starters or some type of visual for them. So Oreo seemed to be the motivator in my classroom. So we use the acronym OREO, which is state an opinion, give reasons, examples, and restate your opinion at the end. So that will be hung up in my classroom. And if needed, I can translate those into the students' native languages so that they're able to make those connections. So day 2 was really the start of our activism writing project. So the goal for this was for my students to pick a country or a global issue and be able to support it with a strong argument in order to make a difference in their community and in the world as well. So I like to engage my students with a video. So I chose How to Change the World by Kid President. And throughout my interview with my students, I found out that both their parents put on captions on their television when they're watching a Spanish program. So I thought that I would integrate that into my classroom. And while I'm showing Kid President, which is a video in English, I would turn on the Spanish captions. That way they're able to see it in Spanish, but hear it in English as well. On the second day, we were going to read Si Se Puede, which means Yes, We Can, by Diana Cohn. And this book talks about advocacy and how they were fighting for equal pay at a child's level that they can understand. But both pages have both English and Spanish on the same page. So the students are able to see the language and the comprehension and like make meaning in both languages. I like to incorporate my students' cultures in there as well to kind of motivate them and get them excited about our lessons. And I like to have them participate in Think, Pair, Share. I think building off of one another, they're able to create ideas and build their vocabulary as well. I like to do a modeling as well as a guided practice for my students. So we talked about how they can come up with strong evidence using primary, secondary sources. I would give the students binders for certain topics, or they could use Chromebooks or computers or whatever resources they have in the school to go ahead and find that as well. And then continuing on day 2, I'd like to have them do an independent practice where the students are given a certain amount of topics. My students mentioned to me that it was kind of hard for them to come up with writing prompts. So it necessarily wasn't the content, it was coming up with an idea. So I wanted to help facilitate that with my students. So I gave them some research topics such as stopping pollution, equal rights on pay, child labor laws, endangered species, food or nutrition, equal rights for education, voting rights, and water conservation. And we kind of would have a conversation about how many of them have ever gone to their own community or have ever helped somebody in their family or in their school. And if so, then we can talk about how activism can help others around the world and how their actions can play a part in their community. So my students would pick one of those topics and then they would figure out, do they want an area to change in that topic? Do they want something for people to do more often, or is there something that people should stop doing? So that's something that their opinion is going to be based off of. And then they would take a graphic organizer, find primary or secondary sources and give those reasons and supporting evidence. And so once they've had their graphic organizer filled out at the end of the day, they're going to start peer editing with someone in the classroom. And like I said before, you could either pair them up with someone who speaks the same native language, or you can pair them up with someone who's a native English speaker as well. And then lastly, on day 3 of my unit, it was important for me to have my students report their knowledge on their research with clear supporting opinions, reasons, and evidence. So I wanted my students to kind of have a discussion regarding the different ways that activists express themselves. I just chose 3 different activists from around the world who came up with different modalities of showing their activism, but this is interchangeable. You could use whichever activist you like in your own classroom. I chose Greta, who used speeches, Malala, who wrote a book, and Mari, who used visual representation for her protest. So those are just different modalities that I like to give my student choices. So my students, for their project, could show me their argument in an essay, an oral presentation, a poster, a PowerPoint, or a brochure. And then at the end, I would have my students participate in a gallery walk, which is basically my students would stand around the room. If they have some type of visual, we could see that and they can speak on it. Or if my students recorded a video or a presentation, every student would get a chance to be heard. And so it's just a way for my students to kind of hear about different global issues around the world and how that they can make a difference in it as well. And that's it. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Alex. By the way, Alex's blog piece where she documented her journey in this project was recently published in the New York State TESOL blog, which is located on our website. And that's a platform we created to disseminate and engage public scholarship in a more practitioner-friendly and cost-effective way. So please check out our blog at your convenience. Our next speaker is Miss Liana Ignero.
Hi, everyone.
Hi.
Sorry, give me 1 minute. Okay, everyone can see my screen, right? Okay. Okay, so hi, everybody. My name is Liana Ignero. I am currently studying at Toro College, and I'm in the TESOL's master program, and I am currently a pre-K teacher in the Eastport South Manor School District. So throughout the courses that I have taken at TESOL, I have come to learn that teachers who adhere to ideologies that favor monolingualism may undermine students' identities and bilingual development. And I've also realized and learned that it's important to challenge monolingual discourse and ideologies in second language acquisition theories, research, and practices. And as we see today, there's a growing increase in the number of students that are native language speakers or that are born in foreign countries. So my goal is to help teachers discover their students' diverse backgrounds and use it to celebrate linguistic and cultural diversity into their classrooms. So for my thematic unit, my central focus mainly focused on family traditions and celebrations that are celebrated around the world and what they celebrate at home. So even though right now I'm currently teaching pre-K, the grade level that I did have in mind for this lesson was for 3rd grade, but it can definitely, I think, be used in older grades as well. And then the content area was social studies. So over the course of 3 days, like I said, we would be mainly focusing on family traditions and celebrations that are celebrated from various cultures. And on day 1, I would have the students listen to a read aloud that talks about different cultures. And during this time, the students may be able to recall and reflect on similar traditions that they may experience at home and think about what's similar or what's different about it. I will have the students work in groups and explain how people celebrate the traditions with details. For example, describing what the tradition is, why it's celebrated, what food they eat or prepare, if they dress up in certain clothing, and just overall how it is celebrated. So I would also support them in different ways by having them use a dictionary as they're researching or using Google Translate to research any unfamiliar words that they're unsure of. And I will also have the students work in groups based on their academic skill level. So before the students go off into their groups, I would, as a whole group, use one tradition together where we can talk about it and fill out a graphic organizer that answers all of those key points about the specific celebration. That way I can model how, like what key terms to look for and how to fill out the graphic organizer. That way when they go off into their groups, they know what to do. But I would have the students choose any celebration they want from a list that they're interested in. Then on day 2, I will have the students interview a classmate, again, about a family tradition that they celebrate at home. And this is also another way to allow the students to think about and make any connections from home or if they have any differences. And to support those students, I will float around the room and assist each group. Maybe I would pair the students with another student who speaks the same language as them, or someone who is at their same skill level, just so it's easier for them to work together. And during this interview, the students will again answer what the tradition is, how it's celebrated. They can talk about the food that they eat, who they celebrate it with. And then on day 3, the students will then present to the entire class what they celebrate at home. So a tradition that is celebrated with their family. And the students will answer questions describing what the holiday is. I would also have the students come into school dressed up with their clothing if they dress up for that holiday, just so it is more authentic for them, and it gives the whole classroom an idea of what the celebration really looks like and how it is celebrated for those different cultures. And the students can also bring in a recipe from either a food or a dessert that they eat during their celebration. And then at the end of the lesson, I would make enough copies for the whole class and create a book filled with different recipes. That way, at the end of the lesson, all of the students could have knowledge about these different cultures and just see that we all come from different places. And then they can learn about different foods and just the cultures overall. So while the students are preparing their presentations, I would assist them by working one-to-one with them. I would also allow the students to answer their questions in their first language if that is easier for them. But of course, they can use the dictionary and Google Translate if they need help. They can also work with a partner who is bilingual, or again, paired with a higher level student for peer assistance. That way, that other classmate can also model how to answer each question. So on this slide, I have the questions laid out that I would have the students on day 2 and on day 3 use just to guide themselves on what questions to ask and make sure they're covering each key point. So they would answer how old they are, where they're born, their celebration that's important to them, what special foods they eat, what special clothing do you wear, are there any special decorations? And then at the bottom, if they choose to, they can draw a picture about what the celebration looks like below. Or like I said, they could also wear their special clothing that they wear for their celebration. So basically my goal during my thematic unit was just to show diversity in my classroom and just show that we're all different, and also to make everybody in the classroom feel welcomed and feel that they're all a part of the classroom. And then I can share the PowerPoint in the chat. And then this is my email address if anybody had any more questions after the presentation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Diana.
Sorry, I'm just trying to.
Yes, our next speaker is named Gallo.
Yes, thank you again. Let me just start presenting really quickly. Good afternoon, guys.
Okay, sorry.
Okay, so hold on. We're still presenting. Okay. Okay. So here it is. So my name is Nelly Kai. I'm a 5th grade dual language teacher. This is my 6th year teaching. I've had the opportunity to work in the lower grades as well. So this was a great opportunity to really dive in and see how I can incorporate translanguaging skills with the little ones. So I had the opportunity to work over the summer with the little ones. So I'm here towards 2nd grade in lesson. So here it is. So definitely, just like my other colleagues, we were challenging monolinguals in the classroom, and I had the opportunity to interview two students who were from Ecuador and El Salvador, and one of them happened to be the combination of both El Salvador and Ecuador. So I just try to find the similarities and the differences and develop plans and goals for them according to their cultures. So it definitely gave me the opportunity to dive into each section or each lesson and really focus on our students, how well we are incorporating their culture in our subject areas where we teach reading, writing, and math, how well we're taking their culture into our classrooms. So with that being said, I definitely started with reading. Reading is a big challenge for me, so I decided to do that, and it's geared towards second grade. So in our first lesson, definitely my students will be learning about the main character through their actions. In lesson 2, they're learning about their character, but through dialogue now. And then on lesson 3, they're talking about the relationships between other characters, and they are exposed to these 3 different things. Now, in terms of, so the overall picture is story elements, and this is for second grade. So in my first lesson, I had the opportunity to design a lesson about learning about the main characters through their actions. So in this case, I decided to make sure that the students had access to books that reflect their cultural background. So they get to dive in and learn all about their characters' actions using their books and their book baggies. So I put there bilingual because I made sure, because reflecting back to my students, I know that Spanish was a big component of their identity. So I had to make sure that it's valued in my class. So I make sure that they had these resources available. So for example, I had the book Que Montón de Tamales, definitely goes back to home where they can relate and see themselves in the character's shoes. So it opened for them to be more engaged in the lesson itself while they're learning about their main characters, while they're looking at their actions. So that was one of the main things that I had to make sure that I incorporated. I know my students in this lesson, they do a lot of interaction with their peers while they're completing their group work. So I made sure that they use their L1. So Spanish, it was a big push, but at the same time, I know I differentiated for all the other learners by providing the different scaffoldings. So this is one of the examples for one of the low groups, I want to say, where they're using a story arc to retell the story. And of course, they're using visuals and they're using the Seesaw app while they're doing the activity. Meanwhile, I have other groups where they're using Thank You, Mr. Falker by Patricia Polanco, and they're retelling the story using visuals. And also they're pairing and matching sentence strips with illustrations. So I'm providing all the scaffolds for them so that they are able to understand the lesson, which is to see their actions within their books. Now, how can I make a connection back home? Well, I always have parents or grandparents or any family member in the house to tell them stories. Why? Because then they're alert to listening to the stories, and it works back to like thinking back of the actions itself. So that's all about lesson 1, just getting them to think about the actions their characters are going. Now for lesson 2, it builds on, we're going to use the same texts in that they have chosen. So a lot of student choice within here. So in the second lesson, we focus on the dialogue. And then in the dialogue, again, they're using their texts to figure out dialogue. So with this one, again, they have the opportunity to work on differentiated worksheets. And again, thinking about their learning styles, I also have other students who are using Flipgrid. I'm not sure if you use Flipgrid, but Flipgrid definitely gives them the opportunity to practice dialogue where they feel comfortable speaking and, you know, editing and recording as many times as they want until they're happy and they're comfortable and, you know, they're okay with it. So it gives them the opportunity to do that. Also in the room, I let them choose the language of their choice. It's very important that you value that aspect, because just like I said, it goes back to my two girls who they identify themselves with Spanish, and it was a big component for them. So valuing language, it was very important for me. So in this case, while they're using their books, they're using Flipgrid and they're able to use the language of their choice. I know other students have used Mango Abuela y Yo. It relates really close to home. So Marisol McDonald doesn't match, also a great resource. Who's by it's by Monica Brown. She does a lot of great resources with Spanish. I know because it reflects with my students' profile. Now, how can I connect this back to home? I always, because it's centered towards dialogue, I had students go back home and try it at home while they were prepping food with their families, just having a discussion about, you know, how to do something. And I know for some of them, they love Flipgrid. So they use Flipgrid there. And it's just a way of exposing them to the language itself, whether it's in Spanish or English, whichever language they were comfortable with, or just mixing both languages. Because at the end of the day, what I really wanted them to get at is just to be able to practice their oral skills, whether it's a mix of the language where we would be translanguaging and code switching. That was fine. It was acceptable as long as they did it back at home. And then on the third day, on my third lesson, they were learning about the main character. We focus on the main character and the relationship between other characters. So in this case, they're focusing while they're learning the story and they're understanding the story, they're also thinking how other characters play an important role. So how do I activate the prior knowledge in this particular case was the movie Coco. I think everyone has seen it, and because of the culture in my room, I decided Coco was a great way to start their knowledge. So I just basically said, you know, Miguel can be with, you know, the aunt, or Winnie the Pooh can be Winnie the Pooh without Piglet, or Princess Anna can be without Elsa and Olive. So kind of just getting them to be active participants. So again, they use the same book. So it's a lot of the books they use. It's continuous. They use for different work. So in this case, again, just like other groups, they are using their, for example, I have here Que Montón de Tamales. They're continuing to use that as well, while they are learning about the second characters within the story. And they're doing different work. Also, they do have choice. I think choice is also an important part where you give them choice, especially for your higher group, what they're capable of doing. So I think it's important. And how do I connect back to home? Well, they're doing extension activities here. Well, they can have a family movie night where the student itself can choose a movie, or, you know, they take roles at a home and they can do the same work, like they can practice it at a home. So that's how parents can help us as teachers also to help them develop language, but also understand the bigger picture, which is like story elements and what happens within stories. And then last but not least, how do I bring everything together, bringing the community together? Well, in my school, we used to have Fabulous Fridays. Why? Because we had the opportunity to take a period to have parents come and do read alouds with the students, and they would bring their own books. Students would choose it sometimes. So it was nice to see the engagement between them, especially when it was like in their native language, which was interesting. We also had opportunities to do cook shop, where they prepare homemade recipes. Like, for example, we've done the black bean salad. Like we would get the material, the ingredients, and then parents would come and share this recipe with them, and we'll have like a gathering. And last but not least, just to tie everything back together with the books, in the classroom, we would do a potluck where students bring food from their own home and everyone gets to try it. So I think that's the best one out of all because they love food. And so it's just thinking about ways how to bring their culture and also value it through reading, but also tying back to home and then putting it back together in the community and making them feel like that their culture is important, because it's very valuable. So these are some of the things that we would connect as a whole in my 3 lessons. And that's it. And this is the way of saying thank you, gracias, grazie, and arigato. And thank you for listening to me.
I want to thank you, all these teachers, all these talented teachers are showing us that the supporting equity and inclusion doesn't have to be involved reinventing the wheel. So all this can be done within the parameter of supporting student mandate. And all we need is to shift our mindset. Instead of seeing students from a deficit-based perspective, we look for students' assets and find a way to incorporate them into the classroom in a strategic, thoughtful, and impactful way. And through this project, we realize how important it is to be aware of the lens that we are using when we theorize a student. When we start to shift our perspective and we start seeing things that we did not see before, it opens up our horizon, and it can be overwhelming but inspiring at the same time, and make us realize that we are so we can be so unequipped to in terms of harnessing the community frontal knowledge, and how important it is for us to develop our capacity and skill in tapping into it as a classroom and material. So with this, we want to open the floor for discussion. We would like to invite you to share your experiences supporting a multilingual learner in your classroom by inviting community and culture, student culture into your classroom.
Ching, this is for the friends. This is my question I typed. Should we provide translated text in the student's first language for the reading, story, and content academic vocabulary, cognates, or like using the first language? Say if the student has a story, whatever, should we also provide the translated version as well? This is for Ms. Lin and all the presenters. Like Nellie, Alex, and Sandra.
I think you can go first, Nellie.
It's okay, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, I think if you provide translated text for the students, it gives them a better comprehension of the story. It helps them understand, the visuals are one thing in the book, but giving them a translated text, it just helps them a little bit more with their comprehension of the story. I definitely use cognates. It's important to have a cognate word wall. It helps the language learners work both ways, whether you're learning the first language or the second language. It helps them understand and be able to make comparisons in the words.
And also, are you in favor of having a translation app? Because I know there's cognates for English and Spanish, but students from let's say non-romantic languages like Korean, Arabic, or Chinese or Mandarin. Ms. Tandila and Ms. Itzer and Ms. Callie, what do you folks have to say? To enhance differentiated instruction so they can keep pace with their classmates in a mixed level class, whether it's a standalone ESL or in an academic class like a social studies class.
Well, I believe that it's important to use translation apps when possible, especially if, for example, if I have an Arabic student that I don't know how to speak Arabic, then it's important to use Arabic translation. Obviously, it's not going to come out perfect, but I think it's going to assist them in acquiring the language.
And just to add on to Sandra, I had the opportunity to work with in that type of setting, but I had used the app itself. I would let the student use it and talk to me because I want to make sure that they're active participants in the class. So providing that translation, and even though the language is not there yet, having them speak to the device itself, the iPad, it gives you that sense of belonging, because that's what you want the student to feel, that because of language, he has the opportunity to participate. So the app, like Sandra was saying, it helps a lot. Like it will do the translation for you. So you can definitely use an iPad if you have iPads and just translate it. So there
are also people in the building. Sometimes there are paraprofessionals in your school building that can also be helpful and resourceful for a language that you may not be able to find easily in an app. There are so many dialects sometimes in some countries that it's not always going to be the same language. And if you have someone in the school that can assist you, it's helpful, definitely.
If I may put in my 2 cents, I think it is good to use the Translate app and to have student access to classroom material. However, I feel if we are thinking about this way, then we are appeal to the lowest common denominator of students' assets. So from the asset-based point of view, we need to go beyond the translation. So Robert's question, I feel it's actually help us to address the elephant in the room for us. That is the English only climate in today's school culture. And most of us feel that the best we can do is to translate. But however, our project is trying to focus on create a rich, multilingual, multicultural, ecologist system where students feel comfortable to invite their culture and the language into the classroom community. And this also makes us realize that the principal and administrator are the key piece for this puzzle. So, and many people, I'm sure, have expressed the same sentiment. That they will develop some equity-based project and they gain support from their peer. But then their project was stopped by their principal, who insist on the English-only policy, and often in the pretense of supporting state mandate. And that's why I hope this presentation can help us make an argument that supporting equity and inclusion does not contradict with the state mandate and college readiness curricula. On the contrary, it actually add value to it. But we need to go further than that. And I think more than often, we feel we are preaching to the choir. So what we really need to do is to continue to push the envelope of discourse beyond our closed circle. I'm sure most of teachers here all agree that we need to support multilingual and support their culture and languages. But within the school culture, we need to know how to navigate, a different kind of mindset, and this can be challenging, and this have to be done strategically. I want to invite other people's comments. I know that there are a lot of expertise in the audience.
I just want to add on that I think when you give students the opportunity to use their L1, it's very important, very, very important, because they can transfer the skills from L1 to their L2. And that's a very important thing. I've heard, I have seen it where teachers tell their students, English, English, English. It's like turning them off. And you don't want that. You definitely don't want that, because then their motivation goes away and they don't feel comfortable using their native language. Their identity is a part of them. It's an identity that you, like, as teachers, we have to value. Even if we're not understanding, it's just setting up, like Sandra has said before, it's setting up that environment where they're comfortable coming in with whatever they have, their culture, and building on from it while they're acquiring English. So if they need to translanguage, say if they're just speaking in English or in Spanish only, and then they're throwing English in there, it's valid, because eventually they'll transfer all the skills that they have in their native language to English. And that's what the project is all about, letting students feel accepted and and giving them the sense of belonging so that they can excel and continue growing with their L2.
Thank you, Nelly. That's really well said. So now it's already 5 o'clock, so I want to be respectful of everyone's time. Thank you, everyone, for spending time with us. I hope that we can all put in our effort in continue to push the discourse, push back the monolingual discourse. That wherever you go, you try to raise the critical discussion about this. Thank you for coming today, and I want to invite all the presenters to put in your email here. I know some of people would like to have your PowerPoint presentation. Thank you, and I want to wish everyone a good evening, and stay safe, and we'll see you at some of our webinars. Thank you.
Mhm. All right.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Everyone,
Yeah.
stay safe.
Sandra, wait.
Thank you, Sandra, Nelly, Liana, Alex. You did a great job. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Do we send you our presentations?
Yes, please, you can do that, and I will send it to all the registrants.
We have questions. Can we stay behind?
Yes, of course.
Do you want to stop recording?
Oh, yes. Let me stop it. Let me try to find the record button. Sometimes I just can't find the record button.